What's happening, Sabres fans? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports podcast for the annual Buffalo Sabres season recap, the season that was the 2020-2021 season. A very interesting season, to say the least, and things have only gotten more interesting and more, shall I say, controversial over the last 24, 48 hours. And I got my buddy Phil Munson on here to join me on the show. As we said earlier in the season, we did our season preview. Once the season was over, we would recap it. We had hoped that recap would happen under much better circumstances than what we witnessed throughout this season. But unfortunately, Phil and I are going to be talking about probably one of the worst seasons in Sabres history. I think it could be thrown out there. There was some good, but there was far more bad than good, but there was some good too. And we're going to leave, the show with thoughts on the good. But first we got to talk about the bad. Phil, thanks for joining me, buddy. Thanks for coming on again.
Oh, no problem. Like we said right before the show, this is going to be a stark contrast from what we let off the season to be.
Right. I mean, my expectations heading in, and to give a preview, the Sabres go out, they reel in the big fish in Taylor Hall. The thought process of having Hall and Eichel on the same line, maybe mixed in with Olofsson, Reinhart. Jeff Skinner didn't have a great year last year, but he's known to be a 20, 30, 40 goal scorer when he was in Buffalo a couple years back in his first season with the team. We thought that things would be much better, but they weren't. And recapping this season, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room right out of the gate in this 2020-2021 season recap, and that was the locker room cleanout reactions. Every year you have these locker room cleanouts when the season ends earlier than anticipated. You see the sides of frustration, and you see that within some of the players on the team far more than others, and we got to address what took place with Jack Eichel. Phil, Jack Eichel and the Buffalo Sabres, will Jack Eichel stay or will Jack Eichel go? Now, before we debate that question, you give your take on it first, and then I'll give my take on it. I just simply want your take on what are your thoughts on Jack Eichel and the Buffalo Sabres currently, based on what you saw in that interview with Eichel and the Buffalo media yesterday?
Well, I saw Jack Eichel be very upfront, very honest. That's why I'm not going to give some splashy introduction to, what my thoughts are. He was upfront. He was honest. He did, to kind of like get all the way to the end, he did acknowledge playing for his teammates. He puts responsibility on himself as the captain. Those things wouldn't have been said a couple of years back because he wasn't at that maturity level. He has taken steps forward. He's not blaming everybody but him. He's only blaming himself for how the season went, and he wasn't even there. And then we kind of dive into his honesty part where, as me and you kind of had alluded to, the media had kind of started prodding him, and I think he'd been sitting for too long and wasn't talking to the media. I don't know if that's his own show, like choosing, or that's the Sabres choosing. It sounds like a lot of this. After getting his comments, it sounds like the Sabres were keeping a wrap on him. So you and me have to take it from a person to person, thing. If your work says you can't go get a surgery X, Y, and Z because we're not going to pay for it, something like that, or we're not going to let you get that second opinion, I think me and you would probably fight that. And I get it. The NHLPA is there for a reason, and there's Elliot Friedman explained it really well in a couple of his tweets. He also explained it on 31 Thoughts, or briefly mentioned it on 31 Thoughts. The whole thing with Eichel's comments yesterday just leads you to believe there is a divorce on the way, which at the beginning of the year, me and you both said, well, we hope that things really would have to go off the rails. And Sabres being Sabres, things have gone off the rails. And I'm not really blaming Kevin Adams because he was left with literally nothing, not a scouting staff. He didn't have an assistant GM. Rochester is a bunch of ECHL guys right now. Sorry, I'm not getting off topic of Eichel, but these things add into the Eichel situation.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Adams didn't have the resources. He went and got Taylor Hall. He went and got the big fish. Taylor Hall yesterday even explained in his comments after his OT winner in Boston, he said he felt bad for Jack Eichel. He knew the situation. Him and Eichel are now like close buddies. And that circle, players like that, the Sabres need to realize, Eichel, Taylor Hall, they have voices to a lot of players. And if you just think you're going to be able to fix this in an offseason by signing guys, you got another thing coming, because they're not going to say anything. Taylor's not going to say anything good about Buffalo, even though he was all for coming to Buffalo when he first got here. He wanted to sign a multi-year deal, blah, 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 blah. He's not coming back. He's probably going to stay in Boston. Eichel's comments to me were upfront, honest, kind of what we all needed to hear from him because we hadn't heard from him for so long. And again, I'm 99% sure that was probably the Sabres telling him not to say anything. And the worst kept secret was he had a rib injury, and that was floating around social media. He had a broken rib. Like, nobody likes playing with a broken rib. You can't breathe. He had an ankle injury, and then he has the neck issue. And I had neck issues, and I can't imagine playing or being told, hey, you can't go get this fixed when I'm playing when you're playing a professional sport like that. So my thoughts on Eichel going or staying, I would say it's getting closer to 75% that he's going to be gone before the beginning of the season. Probably maybe worst case scenario, he gets traded. And when I say worst case scenario, you don't really want to trade a star player like that in the season because you're probably not going to get the return you want because it's not a trade deadline deal because he's got so many years left on his contract.
Right.
That's going to happen on the draft floor if and when that does happen. But we'll get into the other interviews, and I'll circle back around. But get your thoughts out there. I don't want to kill it too much.
So yeah, I would get your thoughts first. You're the guest. I got to take in what you're saying, and you touched on the whole Taylor Hall thing, and I saw what Taylor Hall said in regards to Jack Eichel's playing experience in Buffalo, kind of molding it, meshing it in with his playing experience in Buffalo too. And it kind of frustrated me in a way. I know Taylor Hall was asked the question. He's going to answer it. But it just paints yet another negative light on Buffalo. And a part of me, as like a Buffalonian and a Sabres fan that wants to see the Sabres do well, it's like now we have players that used to play for the organization somewhat not trashing us, but also confirming what we already know. And it to me, it was like, was that a little bit out of turn from Taylor Hall? Do we need to hear that from Taylor Hall? I'm not mad at Taylor Hall. I'm more mad at the situation that it is what it is. And the situation that it is, this team has been bad for a long time, 10 years without the playoffs. Jack Eichel was looked at as this ray of hope that could possibly lead the Sabres to a Stanley Cup championship for the first time ever and give the city something to hang their hats on. And now only 6 years later, 6 years is a long time for Jack Eichel in terms of what he's experienced and not winning anything and not playing in the playoffs. But 6 years, this guy's only 24 years old. And we're talking about more likely than not, 75%, and I agree with that, 75% chance, in my opinion and in yours, that Jack Eichel's a goner. And I thought that there was a real reason for Jack Eichel to possibly be gone due to what the Sabres haven't provided him. And now I think that it's simply better for not just Jack Eichel, but for the Sabres to just part ways. Sometimes it's just better for two teams for two people. Think of it like in a relationship. It's just better for two people to just part ways. They're better off friends than they are dating. Not that, Jack and the Buffalo Sabres will be friends if they break up, but you say that on the surface, hey, we're going to be friends, when really we're going to stay as far away from each other as possible just for the betterment of our own lives. And in this case, Jack Eichel's career, and in this case, the future of the Buffalo Sabres. Do you think that it's just better for both sides to just simply say enough is enough? It didn't work out. it's not going to work out. Let's just part ways.
At this point, yes. I mean, there's a big chunk of me that would love to see him back in a Sabres uniform next year. That's not. I mean, why wouldn't you? Because he's an amazing talent. He can be a top 5 center in the league. He has been a Hart candidate. He proved that last year. When you see the best of Jack Eichel, he is one of the best players in the league. I've been trashed on Facebook is the epitome of terrible takes. Twitter's bad too, but like Facebook with hockey whatever. I had a guy I said he was a Hart candidate last year. He was like, he's not a top 5 guy in the league, and I was like, there was a reason why he was in Hart conversation.
Yeah,
he was
that's
a top
the MVP,
5 player.
Right.
And it's like whatever. And I wasn't like, I'm not gonna. You know me. I might say one or two things, and then I'm just like, I'm done. Like I'm not digging myself into a Facebook grave. It's just like the old Bills whatever fan discussion page that they finally took down. That was just a cesspool. They were bad. It's just like Sabres Twitter, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we're heading towards divorce, breakup, whatever you want to say. I feel bad because I don't think that's not what Eichel wanted. I really think he does have a really. It's just like how you were saying as being a Buffaloian. I'm Buffalo, Rochester. I'm a bit of both, but it's all the same.
Right.
He embodies a lot of what we want, enjoy. He takes a lot of time to go to the hospitals, to go to the cancer centers, especially for the kids. He donates. But he volunteers, and that's not public knowledge until like a news station decides to show up there and try to interview him. And the thing with Eichel is he doesn't want that.
Right.
He could care less about the tension. He just wants to do, because where he came from, that's kind of what he was already doing from Boston and from Mass. So, like I said, this comes from a person. Like, this is so personal, where we all, I think, are on the side of like, man, we would love to have you, but, and you've kind of alluded to it, we understand that you want to leave because we've all had that friend before where we're just like, dude, you gotta leave, or girl, you gotta go.
You're right.
And as soon as it happens, it's like a relief for everybody. And, you know, and we'll get into like the logistics, because I have a good idea of scenario, and I don't have like players and picks and stuff like that. I just have a scenario, the order of what the Sabres should do to get to the Jack Eichel trade. But I know we have a couple other things when it comes to the locker clean out.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're going to discuss as far as what a Jack Eichel trade would even look like. And I mean, we have and the fact that Phil and I have so much to digest from this entire season. I mean, from Ralph Kruger to Don Granato to Reinhart to Risto to the success of Casey Middlestat to Dylan Cousins. I mean, we're going to discuss all of it for Sabres fans on this show. So this Sabres show might be a little bit of a long one, but it's one that I think fans need right now, because this season was the worst I've seen, Phil, in Sabres history. Just everything went wrong that could have went wrong, and then some. Like you take a batch of what could have went wrong, and it just went even more wrong. And in terms of Jack, I mean, I just think it's the time. I think the time is now to either come to a decision, stay or go. I lean towards. I think if I was, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but if I was general manager Kevin Adams, you might be better off moving him, just based on how volatile the situation is right now. It's not good for the guys that are making the strides and the growth on this team. And I don't know. I never thought I'd say that. I want Jack Eichel here, but at the same time, I won't be shocked if he's not. And I think that's something that Sabres fans are kind of feeling too. They don't really know how to feel about Jack Eichel, and that's what makes it so entertaining. So with that, you know, the whole Jack Eichel discussion, will he stay, will he go? I lean towards he's a goner. I think after that interview where the Sabres kind of, you know, showed that they have a say in what Eichel does with his body and his neck injury and everything like that, I think that might be what does it. The fact that is what could do it. That is what could send Jack Eichel out. Not the losing, not the changing of the coaches. That's the other stuff. This neck injury could be what sends Jack Eichel out in terms of the way the Sabres don't want him to have the surgery that he thinks is required, I guess, for the injury. Crazy. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it is what it is. We move on, though, to Sam Reinhart, and Sam Reinhart had a phenomenal season. Probably, if you look at the sample size that this COVID-shortened season had, this was probably his best season overall, I would say, in terms of the valuable minutes that he got due to the fact that Jack Eichel was out of the lineup. Sam Reinhart moved back to center under Don Granato especially, and I thought he did really well. Now, that's the good part. The bad part is that Sam Reinhart is a restricted free agent. So will Reinhart be staying or going? A restricted free agent, the rules are a little bit different, of course. They have the opportunity to keep him. But, Phil, break down for me how you see this situation playing itself out with Sam Reinhart, and what were your thoughts on Reinhart's season first and foremost?
Reinhart had a spectacular season. He has carried that number 23, which was Drury's, and I know there was somebody in between. I think in between had 23. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But he carried that number 23 real well when it comes to jerseys and like, hey, these are the names you're going to remember wearing 23 for the Buffalo Sabres. Reinhart had probably his best season. He proved that he can play center. Now, with saying that, I noticed something under Granato. I don't know whoever him or the next head coach would do this. What he did with Reinhart was he was the center, quote unquote. But every face-off, depending on, and I can't remember left or right, whichever side Reinhart was better on, that's where he would be the center for that time, and then it would either be Skinner or whoever's one of his wingers would come in and fill in at center to win faceoffs. So they all kind of, and then what would happen is after the faceoff they would kind of flip flop to where. So Reinhart did play center, but he was kind of like a hybrid center in a lot of ways. He still did a lot of things that you would do on the wing. But obviously, like, Reinhardt's got creativity. He's actually pretty decent defensively. I think those numbers showed, I think, his, like, analytics and stuff like that. Like, I don't have numbers off the top of my head. In all departments, he did well. And on a really not-so-great team for a while. Towards the end of the season, the Sabres really weren't. They were one of the, I think they were in the middle of the pack, maybe a little bit above the middle of the pack in, like, actual goals for. Their defensive structure was still kind of meh, but I mean, what are you going to do? That defense was all at the end of the year. It was like Ristelainen was your veteran guy, and that's
right.
Because Colin Miller, he played sparingly, and you don't need to play Colin Miller. You're kind of trying to protect Colin Miller so he can get to free agency and get himself out the door. So, yeah, Colin Miller. Again, not to go off topic, he has so many slap shots. When he takes a slap shot, he shoots it into the guy's shin, skate, knee, every single time.
The lowest slap shot ever in the history of slap shots.
And when they measured it, it was like 100-something miles an hour. But I was just like, whoever's taking that slap shot, I'm like, I felt bad for the guy who was blocking the shot because he's like, it wasn't that he was trying to block the shot. No, Colin Miller shot it into him. It's just like if you were playing NHL and you're just like, and you just clock the guy in front of you. Like, Colin Miller, like, I like him. I felt like he was a decent defenseman, your bottom pair defenseman kind of thing. But yeah, he's got some greener pastures. But anyways, Reinhart, and kind of what me and you had talked about before we popped on the show, more than likely with him, with his best season, if you were to count it versus an 82-game season, he'll probably, so his value is probably between 6.5 and 7.5 million, maybe in the uppers of 8.
Right.
Depending on how you look at it and what team you are. The problem is with the Sabres, thank you, Jason Botterill, instead of just signing him to a long-term deal when you were here for probably about $5 schmil, probably even less, 5.5, whatever. You could have locked him up for 5 to 6 years, he would have been here for most of Jack's career. We probably wouldn't really be talking about Jack right now, other than the injury thing. Because that goes into this whole Jack Eichel thing too, which again we'll circle back to later. If Reinhart was locked up, I would not think Eichel would be as out the door. They're friends. They're pretty close friends.
Right.
And I'm not saying Reinhart's but he's kind of like where you have the axe and the chopping board, and it's like, where's the head? That's Reinhardt's the one that's like, that's the straw. And with him coming out and having the comments similar, I don't want to say similar to Jack, but like his frustration. Who doesn't? And then when we get into Risto, it's like Risto, like his comments are like, this is what we've been hearing for the past 3 years. But I think Reinhardt's going to price himself out of the Sabres' plans. I'm betting Kevin Adams probably well knows that. He shouldn't. At the time, I thought it was a good idea to sign him a 1-year deal. Sure, you could have signed him to a 2-year deal, and then you kind of move him to free agency. But the Sabres are going to offer him $6.5–7 million, or whatever his market value is, because that's what they do in restricted free agency. Because these last few seasons have been terrible when it comes to that. He's going to go to arbitration. He's going to ask for, how I told you, he's going to ask for some obscene amount of money, like $10–12 million. And he's going to price himself out of town because you have to meet somewhere in the middle. And when you if he did say $12 million, the Sabres were saying, we'll give you $6 million. Guess what? You have to go in the middle, and it's $9 million. Like Jeff Skinner, they're not going to pay somebody else $9 million. So I think Reinhardt's, he is going to be traded. His rights are going to be traded. It might be to Seattle. That might be something with Seattle so that they don't touch somebody else. I don't know. Reinhart, though, is key to Jack Eichel's trade. Again, we'll get back to that, but that's my feeling on Sam Reinhart, and I feel bad because Sam Reinhart I've actually really, really liked. And if people don't remember, everybody was having the Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart comparison. Guess who's the better player? Sam Reinhart, and everybody wanted Sam Bennett, and I was one that kind of wanted Sam Bennett at the time, just because I felt like he was a little bit more of a grinder and a hitter and things like that. But what do I know? So we got the better Sam at the end of the day.
Right. I've always liked Sam Reinhart. I have to say, like, as a Sabres fan, I've always felt like Sam Reinhart was a really underrated player, kind of got overly criticized, especially there was a kind of a odd breakaway that happened last season or maybe a season prior to that. And Mike Harrington asked Sam Reinhart why he gave up on the play. And Sam Reinhart looked at him like, how dare you ask me that question? And I really actually liked that because Sam Reinhart didn't give up on the play. The guy just blew right past him, and the puck was on the opposite side. And the guy was gone. I mean, there was no – he was on the opposite end. You probably remember what I'm talking about. But
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, the exact scenario.
It was, so the way I remember it, and then I remember the question afterwards, and that kind of, who you said asked the question. I mean, that's like one of those things where like doesn't surprise me who asked what question in a media scrum,
right?
And it doesn't surprise me about Sam Reinhart's reaction in real time. I was mad at Reinhart, but then I think because Sabres Twitter at the time wasn't as volatile, it was just like, well, actually, if you take a closer look, and it's like you said, you take a closer look, and he was kind of already like burnt out. He was, I think, close to a minute into his shift. So for him to like have to turn on a dime where he's not known to do that, he's not Jeff Skinner is the figure skater of the team where he can pirouette and bust out. Sam Reinhart isn't that. He's smooth, but he's not like fast smooth. It's just he can get to the area in time.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's Reinhart is. I agree with you there.
There have been a ton of moments like that in his career where the Buffalo media has kind of poked fun at him, and I think he's had it. I think he's at that point where he really needs a fresh start. I mean, I'm listening to the conference calls or pressers or clean out conferences, whatever you want to call it, and I'm listening to them on Odyssey with the instigators with Andrew Peters and Craig Rivet, and Andrew Peters is like, yeah, it's best for that guy to leave. It's best that, it's the best for him, the best scenario for him to leave and find something else. I think it might, dare I say it, I think it might even be better for Reinhart to leave than it would be for Eichel to leave. Reinhart has been here a year longer, and I feel like Eichel has been like the darling of the Buffalo media, almost to a fault, when Sam Reinhart has been hated by the media to a fault, for sure. I don't understand why Reinhart has been looked at as this player that is just not that great when he's had over 20 goals scored almost every year he's played here. So, every year he's played here, I'm pretty sure. So it's tough for me. I think that with Reinhart, he could be somebody that they send, and in a way, if they do trade him, I don't want them to. I want him here. But if they do trade him, now is the time to trade him if there was ever a time to trade him, right? I mean, his value is through the roof given the season that he had, this past season. And, he's a two-way guy. He can play wing. He can play center. I think he's a natural center that, a media member asked him, hey, 3 years ago, should you have been moved to center? I mean, the way this organization has gone about developing these players, whether it's Reinhart, Eichel, Dahlin, I mean, it has been a complete and total just cluster, what. And I think some of these guys are starting to take notice. They're starting to say, hey, we've been spinning our wheels for, in my case, Reinhart's case, since 2014. Makes no damn difference who our head coach is. We need to just win games. And Kyle Okposo kind of shared those sentiments as well. Mm-hmm. Whoever our head coach is, it doesn't freaking matter. We need to win games. It's just that simple. So coaches coach, players play. I felt like Reinhart did really well. He made the best of a really bad situation. I hope he stays here, though. But percentage-wise, you threw out 75% for Jack Eichel probably leaving. Where are you at percentage-wise for Eichel? And I'll throw out my percentage as well.
For Reinhart, you mean?
Yeah, for Reinhart. Yep, for Reinhart. Yep.
I would say it's probably the same, maybe a little bit more, probably like 75 to 85% for Reinhart, just because his value is really good, and that it directly correlates. So that's where I'll tie this in. You need to trade if you are planning on if you're Kevin Adams or whoever the GM, because who knows the way the Sabres are going. I know they just got an assistant GM. The way the Sabres are going, I would not be surprised if Kevin Adams ends up becoming like the czar of the hockey department, and they end up hiring like an actual GM. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
just because Sabres.
We have to touch on this. And I know we're talking about Sam Reinhart, and I think I agree with you. I agree with you that Sam Reinhart, 100%. I'm not trying to interrupt you here, but just to get the elephant out of the room and address what is actually taking place. What the hell is the problem with this team? I mean, I think now we're saying we got Eichel, we got Reinhart, we got Dahlin. During the season, we said we got Hall. On paper, this team should be much better than what they have been. So, in your humble opinion, I have my opinion as to what it is. Why are the Sabres as bad as they are? Like, if you were to say one thing as to why they are so bad, what would that one thing be?
I was kind of hoping this would come up, and I kind of almost when I did my hand thing, I kind of looked like Macho Man for a second. I was like, that like should have thrown on the shades and
bio,
just
that jacked up. That bio was awesome for Macho Man. Andy Savage, that episode, it was great.
Yep. The Stone Cold one, they've done so many documentaries on Stone Cold where it's like you kind of already knew everything before going into it. But yeah, Macho Man was like, if you can. Vice is a free app on like Roku. People are like, what are they doing? Vice is Dark Side of the Ring. People,
the best, right?
Dark Side of the Ring is amazing. Even if you don't like wrestling, you don't have to like wrestling. There are some really good stories because they're not WWE produced. But anyways, so if you look at I hate doing this, but this is how we have to do it here in Buffalo. You have to compare the Bills to the Sabres every single time. It's the top down. The problem with the Bills for so many years was the top was so bad. We kept bringing in GMs that just didn't do it. Bill Polian left, and then it kind of went off the rails a little bit. And that was a slow burn. The Sabres, it was just kind of like we had Darcy Regier, and poor Darcy, because I know the last few years, and side note, he's had some health issues. That's why he's really not in the NHL right now. That's why if you notice, he was with the Coyotes for a little bit, and then he had to leave.
Right.
They said they let him go, but it's health issues. Anyways.
Right.
Darcy leaves, and it was kind of written on the wall. He'd been there for I shouldn't say too many years. He was there for a long time. It's kind of like in Pittsburgh with Jimmy Rutherford. He had to go, just like in New Jersey, so on and so forth. And then Lindy goes. But it went from that's why I caution Sabres fans with the Don Granato thing. Because we saw Ron Rolston, and we were just like, haha, Ron Rolston's gloves. He's got some gardening gloves. He's great with the young players. They're dancing in practice. There's a video of Grigorenko and him dancing on the ice in NHL practice before the season. Somebody tell me where that, and I know you have fun, and I get it.
Right.
You have to have fun days, but this is like you're prepping to get ready for the regular season, and you're saying in the circle. That's ingrained in my head for some reason. I just see Grigorenko doing this little Russian dance. And anyways, so top down, so Darcy tries to save it with Rolston. He ends up, both of them get canned. And then we start doing these recycled coaches, and then you get Tim Murray in here. He's talking about PP slapping, and he brings in Kane, and he brings in Bogo. He brings in O'Reilly, which, I mean, I'm not gonna open up the can of worms. Look where we are now. Berglund's in a different country, getting arrested.
Yeah.
And then Sabaka's in that country with him too. I don't know what he's doing. So, and Kane, to me, I know certain people are like, well, we let go of Kane for a bag of nothing. He's got a bad rep, and from my understanding, probably the reason why it took a little bit longer for Jack to, mature a little bit was because he had a little Kane who's the devil on one shoulder, and then you had Ryan O'Reilly on the other who's
Let's just call a spade a spade. Evander Kane likes to party, and there's nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As
the dollars
around. Human being, but when you're a professional hockey player making millions of dollars and trusted as an older guy to take a younger guy under your wing, it's not a good look, right? So
his talent is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but look what's kind of happened in San Jose. He's bankrupt. He's in trouble. He's up and down. It's it's not to the point of how bad Skinner's kind of been, where the drop off happened there, but it's pretty. There's similarities there, and he's going to go fight your boy, whichever Paul brother it is.
No, he's not my boy. I hate them both. I want to punch them both.
No, I'm saying your boy, meaning who likes the Paul brothers at this point? They made Mayweather look like it was the biggest double switch.
They made Floyd Mayweather look intimidating, which he's not. I've never been intimidated by Floyd.
No, because he just gets a lot of hits on you. He's very fast. He'll punch you in the face a million times and then get away from you. That's. I mean, again, sorry, not getting off topic, but but that's what I'm saying. Evander Kane he has to make money somewhere else, not in the NHL, because he doesn't get paid enough because he bet it all away on whatever he bet it on.
But what would you say? I know that I definitely see one thing leading to another, Ryan O'Reilly, Evander Kane. All those pieces leaving, those are big pieces that that didn't work out. So that was the first couple dominoes. But and I'm saying when I first watched,
we need there needs to be a president. I mean, to get to my point, there needs to be a president of hockey operations, and there needs to be somebody above. There needs to be somebody in between Kim and Terry. And that's people were going after them, and this is not a social media. This is not a podcast slamming my hand on the ground going, Kim and Terry are blah, blah, blah. I get it. But most NHL teams, the owner isn't really in the forefront. And when they are in the forefront, generally it's not good. That's happened time and time again. And I'm not going to name teams because that's not right for me to say. But as a Sabres fan, these two come out at the wrong times, and we never see them when it's like this year where it's a tire fire and nothing, and everyone's like, where's Kim? I'm not going to go down that road. I'm not going to bash her. I'm not going to bash Terry. But they need to step away. That's all I'm asking. That's all I think everybody's asking. I think they need to get somebody that is going to take it. And I get that they got burned by LaFontaine, or they burned LaFontaine, whatever. This team doesn't have a structure, and the structure's bad. And then they ripped away a lot of the pieces for Kevin. Like, me or you, if your boss just decided, well, Ryan, you don't have, for me, I don't have a computer. You don't get this computer screen. Your mouse is gone too.
Yeah.
The working parts or whatever you do in your daily job and the main things that you do, and those are ripped away from you before you even start. Kevin Adams was set up to fail. And that's where I kind of led you to, I wouldn't be surprised if they made him, because they like him so much, they're not going to fire him. He's just going to get moved.
He's the only guy that, and let's face it, this is another part too, he's the only guy that wants to help this team right now. What guy, what established NHL executive is going to look at Buffalo, and most of these established NHL executives that have a pedigree, they're in their 70s, they're in their 60s, they're old, they're not these young guys. They have long careers, whether it was as coaches or coaches and executives. What guy is going to come in here and look at this team and say, I'm going to dedicate the last decade of my life to making the Buffalo Sabres great? They might do it, but Terry and Kim Pegula have to pay up. And they said that when they bought the team, right, that they would do whatever it took. They would put all resources out there.
They had an opportunity last year with Don Luce, and he went down to Florida, if I'm not mistaken. They had a chance last year and they didn't want to pay up, and now you're sitting with this, and then like how you said, the trickle down, so the top down. So we're now in the middle section where Kevin Adams has to make decisions with Reinhart and Eichel and to whatever Ristelainen, and goaltending too. And like we said, the kind of good, kind of bad. For the love of God, I'm not saying, it's hockey. We're talking the sport. I'm sure he's a great guy, but Carter Hutton has to go. He's just got to go. He's gone. Well, even they said in whatever, I don't know if it was him or they were like, oh yeah, he's out for the season after the season ended. And I'm like, I blew out my knee when he hurt, when that knee buckled. He blew out his knee. I don't know if it was an ACL, PCL, MCL. Something went. He couldn't put weight on it. It instantly swelled up. Again, this goes back to the management of injuries and stuff like that. And it's almost like a different podcast for a different day. Just because I will rant about it. As soon as I saw Hutton go down, I'm just like, why don't you just say he's out for the season? What's the...
To answer the question, though, I think we did get into the middle tier of what is wrong with the team. Terry and Kim haven't put in place a president of hockey ops. The last time they did, or Azar. The last time they did, it was Patty LaFontaine. Sabres fans loved the move. I don't know one Sabres fan that didn't like the move. And then within a month or 2 month and a half span, if that, Tim Murray made sure that he was the man, and Pat LaFontaine said, I'm out. That's what it looked like from the outside looking in. He said, if Tim Murray's here making the personnel decisions, what the hell am I doing here? What am I doing here? And he said, I'm going to go take a cushion job up in the NHL offices. Why not? So I'd really love to get a microphone and ask Pat LaFontaine, hey, Pat, what do you think of this shit show that's going on in Buffalo right now? And see what he says. But I'm sure it would be an interesting response, but no, to make a long story short, though, I think Terry's got a lot of explaining to do. And, a guy that has a lot of explaining to do tomorrow is Kevin Adams when he talks to the media, because Kevin has been talking about.
He has to be the mouthpiece for Terry. That's the problem, because Terry can't talk. Terry, anytime you put a mic in front of him, he's worse than me or you in front of like 100 people. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And he is a multi-billionaire. Like, so whatever. But I just find it really funny that all of us Twitter world fans are like, well, where are they? Where are they? Why aren't they talking? Kim's well spoken, but sometimes if you ask her the right question, she kind of answers.
She doesn't know how to answer it.
Right.
They don't know. They don't know.
She said that she knew more than us. Like, yeah,
right. They don't know. They don't come from sport. Like every owner that tries to step their feet in to the pro personnel decisions. I can even go to Jerry Jones with the Cowboys. Jerry Jones did not turn the Dallas Cowboys into 4-time Super Bowl champions or 3-time. Jimmy Johnson did. Like that was not Jerry Jones. That was like, it's well known. I mean, Jerry Jones hired Jimmy Johnson. Power to him for that. But Jimmy Johnson was the guy making the trades and coaching the players. Who is making the trades? And most importantly, who is coaching the players this next season? I know Adams will be making the trades, but we need a beefed up front office. And we don't have that right now. Moving on to the player side of things, another player that we could talk about for sure is Rasmus Ristelainen. And we touched on him. He spent 8 seasons with the Sabres, 8 seasons with the Sabres, 0 playoff games. Will he spend another season in Buffalo? You want to talk about players that are dejected, frustrated, pissed off? Rasmus Ristelainen looked like he was ready to just go home. He just wants to go home. He didn't want to answer any questions. He did. I respect him for that. But Phil, I mean, Rasmus Ristelainen, he's been a guy that Sabres Twitter, has been calling for his head for 4 or 5 years now, and they might get their wish. What are you thinking as far as Rasmus Ristelainen staying with the Sabres?
So I think we're all going to get our wish, but this is the caveat. So Reinhart, how I was talking about earlier, in my crystal ball, Reinhart is going to be the one that sets the wheels going. Ristelainen, unfortunately, dude, I'm sorry. This poor guy, as much as Twitter rags on him, he doesn't deserve it as much as we probably give it to him. He was thrown into he's a 3-4 defenseman on a team that needed a 1-2. And if you noticed when Dahlin and Yoki Haru played those one, and Yoki Haru probably shouldn't be playing 1-2 with Dahlin, but when Dahlin took over those first pair of minutes, everybody loved him. He had some bad defensive. Really bad defensive plays, but he played, Granado gave him the keys and whatever. My point is, as soon as Ristelainen kind of got brushed off to that 3rd, 4th slot, I mean, once in a while he made a goofball mistake because he tipped in the goal, but he played fine because he wasn't playing 26 minutes a night. He was playing about 20, and he thrives in that. He was hitting people. He was kicking. He was on the second power play unit, which should have happened years ago. He was getting in front of, the things that you want Ristelainen to do, he was doing for the most part. Yeah, there were some defensive lapses, whatever, analytics, be gone. Where he was playing was where he was suited. He might even be better off as a 5, as a continuous 4-5, because that's where he fits. Now, Ristelainen, so my thing is, Reinhart's going to go, Eichel's going to go. Ristelainen is going to be a season trade, and You think he'll be on the Sabres to start the season? Yeah, unfortunately for him, because you have to think about it this way: if you're getting rid of guys with high cap numbers in Reinhart and Eichel, you have to carry something into the season. There's not a good free agent pool. I know you're going to get guys back with those trades. However, you still probably have to hit, because most of the guys that they're resigning, like Dahlin's not going to get a monster deal like we all thought he would. He's going to get some sort of bridge deal, probably worth like half of what his value will be in a few years, kind of thing. The Sabres have a lot of cap space, so they'll probably take it into the season, and then Ristel all of a sudden has, Potts 5 goals and 20 assists. I mean, maybe I'm a little ridiculous on that, but come trade deadline, He has some nice stats on the power play too. And then you just send him off in the middle of the year, and you maybe you got Gostad for a first. Maybe all of a sudden Risto turns into another first-round pick for you. I love Risto where he's at now, but his welcome is overstayed. And unfortunately, my crystal ball prediction is that he's going to probably start the season with the Sabres, and it might not even be a trade deadline thing. It might be somebody, how it was this year with COVID where guys went down or injuries happened, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
A team might go down and they're like, we don't have a second pairing defenseman and we don't really have anything in the pipeline. And I'm not going to name teams off the top of my head, but like that could happen. And they'll be like, hey, Kevin, hey, and it could be a team that has 2 first-rounders next year, or 2 first-rounders, and they're like, hey, we're desperate, we need this. Here's a first-rounder, here's a second-rounder, and a B-level prospect for Risto.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take his we'll even take his salary, or we'll take most of the salary. Then Kevin Adams, if he's still the GM and not like a czar or something, see ya, there goes Risto. So we kind of went a little there's Reinhart, Eichel. Then you go back to Risto. That's what I think is going to happen. That's my prediction. It logically that makes sense. It wouldn't surprise me if Risto gets traded in the offseason because something might happen in the playoffs. A guy might get hurt and he might not be able to start the season, or he's out for the God forbid. I don't like injuries, but they happen. Mm-hmm. And he's a second pair defenseman for a cup contender, which is honestly what I'd like him to be on. Hopefully, you send all 3 of these guys out west. Send them out west. I don't want them in the Eastern Conference.
I said the exact same thing. If Jack Eichel doesn't want to be in Buffalo, send him as far away from Buffalo as possible. Send him to Los Angeles. Hell, if he wants to go party with Evander Kane again, send him to San Jose. I don't give a damn. If he doesn't want to be in Buffalo, do not be the guy. Kevin Adams is going to go to his grave as the guy that traded Jack Eichel. That's what is going to happen, right? But don't be the guy that goes to your grave trading Jack Eichel to the New York Rangers or trading Jack Eichel to the Philadelphia Flyers or something stupid. If Kevin Adams does that, there will be people just protesting the Sabres in Buffalo. I could see it as clear as day, and that would be a horrible sight. It's a sight that no Buffalonian wants to see. I want to get to Bryce Finer's comment here. If Risto were traded, he'll be missed a lot. Dude plays with heart. I agree with Bryce, and here's my point about Risto. The point that I think it's tough. A guy has spent, in this case Risto, 8 years. The guy spent 8 years here. He's seen so many head coaches, so many players come and go, guys that have helped him in his game, guys that have also hurt his game while they've been here that are now gone. And I'm hard-pressed to find another defenseman on this team that plays with the physicality, I should say, that Risto plays with. Whether people like him, in terms of the analytic numbers that he puts up, this guy smashes people. He's one of the few players on this team that actually hits people and plays a little bit of an old style of hockey. Plus, he's a right-handed defenseman, which in this league, to have a right-handed defenseman that's big, strong, powerful, that can check – and, use his body, throw his body around, that should be a high-demand player for the Sabres if they were to trade him. So, just as much as Eichel, Reinhart, we're questioning what the return would be for those 2 players. For Eichel, it would obviously be a lot. He's a franchise guy. Reinhart, it would be a lot. He's coming off of a career year. But for a right-handed defenseman that is only 27, heading into his 9th season, I'm feeling like if they do trade Rasmus Ristelainen, he'll go for a lot. But how do you replace a guy like that? That's my point. How do you replace Rasmus Ristelainen if you do trade him? And I think that before people go on Twitter and say Risto sucks or Risto's not good enough, how are we replacing that guy? Because he is a tough player to replace.
I was going to joke and say Nikita Zadorov, but that's a joke. Him and Risto were known as the same exact player. Obviously, Nikita Zadorov is a dirtier player and not to the ilk of Risto, which is weird to say. Because I don't know if you knew this. So Zadorov, I don't know where he wasn't on Colorado this year. I cannot remember where he ended up signing. anyways, he
Was he in Chicago? He was in Chicago, right?
He might have been, but he kind of got like outcast, and he's not a good locker room guy. And at least Risto, like guys love him in the locker room. So, but to answer your question, how to replace him? I mean, they have got. I mean, the young guys did prove a lot this year. The defense to me, like Bryson, I've met Bryson. He's the small guy. He's great. I love Bryson.
I was very impressed with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a boomer bust guy every game. That's why he's good on like a second or third pair. But he makes great outlet passes. He always has been able to do that, and he's got gigantic legs. Like I met him, and the jeans he was wearing, dude, were like his leg was like this. Dude was Martin St. Louis. Yeah. And he's a nice guy. He's a nice guy too. So like, I mean, I met him. He was at an Amherst event. And he was really cool. But favoritism, awesome. whatever you want to call it. But I mean, to me, I was like, wow, this guy. From year one to where he is now, he kind of plays the part of like, oh, this is what's supposed to happen in development. Like he started as this, where you don't know what he's going to be, and then he turned into something else. I'm trying to Borgen. Borgen probably he's physical, probably not as physical. He can definitely step into a good role with the Sabres moving forward. Dahlin, Jokiharju, you are going to have to get some sort of physicality here, because I don't think Samuelsson fit that really either. Samuelsson actually didn't. There's a couple hits he had towards the end of the year when he finally got in. If I'm thinking of the right, Samuelson's he was the other one, or is it no?
Yes. Or is it?
I feel like,
or is it?
Was it? You know what I mean? It was the last.
Ristelainen? Or no?
No, it was the last. It was the last like call up, the last defensive men call up. From Rochester.
I don't know that. I don't know that one.
I don't know if it was Samuelsson or. Oh man, I feel bad because somebody's probably watching. It's like, I know who it is.
They should know that. They should know
that. They should know. Yeah, we're picking at the bottom of the. I know the Amherst, but it's like you're picking at the bottom of the roster.
We're really. I mean, we're trying to come up with a solution that no one seems to want to come up with, which is you're. And I'm gonna say this: people are bitching. They've been bitching about Rasmus Ristelainen for years, and they might have reason. I'm not saying that they're wrong. But no one has come up with an explanation as to how you replace the player. You can say you don't like a player. How are you going to replace him? That's the problem that I have with the whole Rasmus Ristelainen discussion. And I like Rasmus Ristelainen. I like Risto. I feel like out of the three, if it can't, I mean, Eichel and Reinhart, they don't want to be here. And who's to say that Risto does too? But I would be harder pressed to part ways, and I can't than I would be with Eichel, because Risto has spent 8 years here, and it's up for debate whether he wants to return. Whereas Eichel is a generational talent; you could get a lot for him. Reinhart is a talent that you could get a lot for him. I don't know what you could get. I know you could get a lot for Risto, but it wouldn't be as much as it would be for Reinhart or Eichel. So I guess I'm less willing to part ways with him because I don't know if the return would be as big, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
The thing is, Risto kind of has. He doesn't have a bad rep around the league. Like, not when I say bad rep, his value. That's why I should have said his values kind of. Just because most teams now have an analytics department, his analytics are really bad. Like. Absurdly bad, and it's because of the position he was put in. I guarantee if he was playing in the 6-7, or sorry, not the 6-7, the like I was saying 4-5 role, 3-4-5 role on the defense, he would have been in a better position to succeed, and we all probably would have been like, no, we're going to keep him. It's just at the time when we signed him to that contract, that was first defenseman contract-ish, and then you weren't expecting to get. You got gifted Rasmus Dahlin. So, but Rasmus Dahlin is proving this year, when as soon as he got kind of like the keys handed over to him, and basically you have free roam out there. If you make a mistake, so be it. You're not going to get, I mean, yes, you're going to get told like, hey, that wasn't a good idea. But with Risto, because of his physicality, I think, and Rasmus Dahlin, Rasmus Dahlin can lay into somebody because he is a freak of nature. Ristelainen is a freak of nature too, but in a different way. Ristelainen, I feel like is like the nasty raccoon that like will not leave you alone, and he'll just like eat you apart. But he'll do something stupid, like run out in the middle of the street and headlights are about to just smack him. Kind of like how he hit himself into the boards last year, the self-board hit.
Mm-hmm.
Dahlin, I feel like, is better overall, where he has everything. He could hit you. He can,
sure.
I mean, he's got into a fight too.
Rasmus Dahlin
he's not going to replace everything that
Risto's going to do. Is the real deal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and we finally saw it.
I like that answer. Yeah, we did. We'll definitely talk about that. The next question, which I think there's a lot of questions about the players. There's the biggest question, arguably, is who the hell is going to coach this team next year? And we move forward, and the question is Don Granato the man for the job? And I've voiced my support of the idea of Don Granato becoming the next head coach. And I'm going to start off with this one, and then I'll hand it off to you. I'm supportive of Don Granato being the head coach, and it's only for the sole purpose that I think these players mentally have gone through quite a lot over the last, we'll even just say 3 years. We'll take since they drafted Dahlin, they've gone through a lot. Prior to that, they've gone through a lot as well. But the young players obviously saw a little bit of a resurgence. The Casey Middlestads, the Paige Thompsons, the Rasmus Dahlins. Those three guys in particular are the present and the future of this team. I think that's the situation that we're playing within right now. And Granato was able to tap into their competitive drive and spirit and rile those guys up. But the problem is with some of the veteran players on this team, I think Don Granato does show a sign that we could possibly be in another rebuild. And there's some players on this team that don't want to believe that we're in another rebuild possibly. And then there's players that are willing to accept where we are. And it's not necessarily in their eyes a rebuild. It's more of a retool, a restructure. Do you see that? And as far as Granato staying or going, what do you think the benefits are, or what do you think the negatives are in Granato staying? And if you don't want Granato to stay, who do you want as the Sabres head coach?
Well, it's such a tough question just because this might be the most important. Well, I don't even want to say that because I feel like head coaches in the NHL, as long as you got the team for the most part, I mean, look at Washington, for example, like when they won the Stanley Cup, as long as they had the right coach at the right time, and then that coach after they won the Cup got fired. I think it's the coach at the time. So, I mean, Don Granato did a lot of things that really helped the young guys. However, he's been known to be a developmental coach with Team USA, and he's just really good developing guys. Now, where does the development stop? We said the same thing about Ron Molson, and that's why I brought him up earlier. I don't want to say that like Ron Molson and Granato are the same coach. They probably aren't. They probably have completely different coaching strategies and yada, yada, yada. However, that's where I want to just caution Sabres fans. Remember Ron Molson. Just remember him. I'm not saying this is – please don't think like I'm like, oh, well, Don Granato is the next Ron Molson. That's my cautionary tale to you. He looks pretty at first. Mm-hmm. We had a small sample size of him. Who knows what team he's going to be housing next year? Because honestly, even if he housed the team that he did today, but you're minusing Reinhart and then eventually Ristelainen out of that lineup. And say what you will about the bottom six for the forwards, so lines 3 and 4. So now you don't have a first-line center. You don't really have a second-line center. You have Casey Middlestat and Cousins as your quote-unquote centers. Like, Middlestat to me is not – he shouldn't be up there in the lineup. He should be your middle six center. He should be a 3 to – he shouldn't be a fourth-line center, but he should be your third-line center. Yeah, because he can get the offense. Sure. He can create and he proved this year.
He's got that speed. Yeah.
Yeah, he sped up this year. He's not the fastest guy still, but he sped up compared to and like I remember how I said there was a stark contrast from the beginning of the year to now, and how I made fun of Middlestat at the beginning of the year. And there's a pull-up bar right behind me over there. Maybe he can do more.
I remember we were talking about him. We were talking about him before the season. I was hoping that they would trade him. I mean, he looked lost as an NHL player, and then by the season's end, dare I say it, he was the best player on the team. He was one of the best players on the team. I think that's safe to say.
It's like Reinhart was
one of the best players on the team.
Yeah, I mean, forward-wise, like it was Reinhart,
and
it was, and then Middlestat and Cousins were like in there. Because Middlestat, I think, was on.
Yeah, for sure.
Middlestat was on a tear at one point in April. He had the most goals. I mean, Reinhart kind of surpassed him with his hat trick game. But there was a stat that Middlestat was in a league of his own with like top guys in the league. And maybe that's a blip on the radar. I don't know. But if we get a month of that from Middlestat a year, or 2 months of that, you know what I mean? Like, if he can pot close to 20 goals in an 82-game season, because he proved that this year on your third line. He was the third line center, basically.
Right. But do you think, what is it that made him, I mean, I definitely think Don Granato tapped into something, though. And this is the tough part. And the cautionary tale that you used is justifiable for sure, because people looked at Rolston in a small sample size and said that he might be the guy, and he wasn't. They fell flat on their face. You know, even
that was the first season that was either the first or second season they missed the playoffs with Rolston. I think it was like so Rolston ended the season and they just missed the playoffs, and then the next year they, like you said, they fell flat on their face. So sorry, I'm just trying to make I'm kind of painting a picture for everybody that sometimes the grass isn't always
compartmentalize it, which
I'm just saying don't hire him right out the bat.
Right.
Do your research. That management needs to go and hard look at guys. I mean, freaking Rob Brindamore just signed a whatever $1.8 million AAV to be the coach of the Hurricanes for the next 3 years. You don't have, if the Pagulas are so worried about spending money, right now coaching is not as expensive as what it was when you decided to bring in Bylsma for $5 million a year. So, and that's, I know that's like, you're talking dollars and cents with coaches, and it doesn't.
And that's what's disgusting. That the sense that, you know, Rod Brindamore gets what, 1.8, you said, and they paid Ralph Kruger like 4.5. Ralph Kruger is probably the worst Sabres head coach of my lifetime. Like it's I'm 29 now. I mean, he was very bad, and it was painfully bad watching them play this year when Ralph Kruger was the coach. Just got so bad that
he lied.
Yes, he lied every day. He lied, and that's the biggest part of it. Don Granato, I think if you're going into a season, I think for some of these guys, they want to build off of what they just did. And I'm not saying they did something incredible, but they were 17 games in a row losers. And Don Granato went 9-11-2. That's practically 500. I'm not saying they lit the world on fire, but or technically under 500. I'm not saying they lit the world on fire, but you know, I think that if they don't want to spend money, maybe they want a coach that coaches players well. I would say Don Granato is definitely on the short list to stay, like as far as coaches. I'd say he's probably a top 3 candidate right now for that team. If I were to guess who the other two are, let's just play a little bit of fun. Mm-hmm. I want John Tortorella. I want John Tortorella if they can make that happen. His son was born here. He worked under Lindy Ruff when Lindy was first here, his first couple seasons here. He worked in Rochester for a little bit as well. He's got ties to this area. I think Torts has had kind of a weird last few years in Columbus where some role players really like him. Some of the stars don't. But, hey, How could that be any different than what's going on in Buffalo right now? Some star players have liked the head coach, some role players didn't. Role players like the head coach they have now, and some stars are kind of skeptical on Don Granato. That's the sense that I get. So, what do you think of a John Tortorella or another, coach with a pedigree coming in here and getting the opportunity to be the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres?
Well, I think we would be remiss to not mention Boudreaux. And
right.
There's
Love Bruce Boudreaux as well.
Yeah, and he has ties to the area as well. I mean, more so Ontario ties. So if people are worried about, like, if he's worried about family, especially around COVID times, you have to interview him. Allegedly, he wants to be looked at on the job, which is like how we were kind of saying, right. Like, who wants this job right now?
Right. He voiced that. He voiced that on TV. I saw.
He said that.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, like Boudreaux gets you to the playoffs. Like that's his pedigree. He gets you to the playoffs. I think he's gotten to the finals. Like once, I think he got there with Anaheim. I can't remember if he's the one that won. Did he win it with Anaheim? Because I know Anaheim was that cup when they won in 2000. That was with Brad May. That was the last year Brad May played.
Wow.
And they won the cup. Wow. Yeah. I don't know if that was Boudreaux or not. But anyways, you got to interview Boudreaux. Seattle, and why I can see the guy's face. It was Vegas's coach and Florida's coach, and he got let go in a weird way for both. He was the tech.
It was Tocchet or something. I can't think.
He got Tocchet just got released.
That's right.
They said he might be kind of like on the bottom of the list. Like if you're making like a top 5, Tocchet might be on the bottom of the list. He got let go from Arizona, which. Arizona is kind of like your West Coast Sabres. They make a lot of head-scratching decisions, but they don't really have ownership. You know what I mean? So, like, not to go down that path, but you got to bring in the veteran guys. I guess maybe you can interview like a couple of college coaches too. That might be a good idea.
Do you lean towards, like, if I were to say Don Granato, based on what you know and have seen, or an established name head coach, which one do you kind of lean towards? An established name or continue on with Granato?
See,
that's the question, right?
The middle for me is Bruce Boudreaux, because I think if we're going to knock it down to the 3 that we just talked about, Tortorella, he might hurt some of your young guys. Then you got Boudreaux, who's kind of in the middle, where he's probably, he might sit like a Casey Middlestat one game for, doing something dumb, or he didn't like how he played. He'll hold guys responsible, is what Boudreaux will do. John Tortorella does it to kind of an extreme sometimes, even for the main players.
Right.
Then you got who we have now in Granato, who, not that he doesn't hold guys accountable, but the younger guys like him because he's a good developmental guy. So that's why that's why when you put out that poll, I said it's so difficult. I hate that. Would be the one absolute thing that Adams should have the most trouble with. Not to say that trades are hard. I get that. Trades, especially for the big name players that they're probably getting rid of, that's hard. But like the head coach of this team, you need to find balance. I like Tortorella. He actually won the last Calder Cup that Rochester
won. Right. That's right.
He's got ties to the area, and maybe he comes in at a hometown discount, as much as it's weird to say, but he might come in and be like, hey, I've watched you guys. I played against you guys. Like, let me come in and fix this thing, and then let me, like, ride off into the sunset. Like, maybe you want to,
yeah.
To me, it's Tortorella or Granato. And then if Bruce Boudreaux ends up getting the job, fine. Because there's, like I said, to me, those are the extremes that you're getting. You're getting John Tortorella, who's, you got Bruce Boudreaux, who's, he's going to get you to the playoffs eventually, hopefully. And then you got Granato, who it might be a couple of years before he gets you to the playoffs. I don't know.
Right. Here is why I want John Tortorella, and I'm stating my case for it. It might have more to do off the ice than it does on the ice. We have seen Dan Bylsma We have seen Phil Housley, former Buffalo Sabre, Hall of Famer as well. We have seen Ralph Kruger. These three lame ducks. Let's just call it a spade. They were lame duck coaches here in Buffalo. And a part of the reason why they were lame duck coaches is they allowed the media in this area to run them over with a Mack truck. The media has in this area, and I will say it, I will call a spade a spade. I've seen it in these interviews, and everyone else has too, and they know it. So I'm not throwing anything out there that nobody knows. The media has been able to have their way with these coaches. Nobody is having their way in the media in Buffalo or anywhere else for that matter with John Tortorella. That's why I want John Tortorella here. More off the ice than on the ice. Just as much off the ice as on the ice. That's why I want John Tortorella here. That's why I kind of single him out. Now, I think that stuff has gotten him into trouble in the past. He fought a player on an opposing team as a coach. He got into a fisticuffs with him. I remember it was, I think Vancouver was playing Calgary, if my memory serves me right, and he kind of reached over and punched the guy. Pardon me for liking that. I think that's actually pretty badass, if I were to say so myself. And I think this city would love him if he was here. Maybe this is the last rightful stop in the long, head coaching career of John Tortorella. I don't know, but I know that the questions that, the Mike Harringtons ask of Sam Reinhart that are a little bit of those gotcha, needling, poking you with a knife, questions, John Tortorella will cut that with a knife, with an even bigger knife. So I'm very curious to see. I know that he's not going back to Columbus. I know that he still wants to coach. I know that Bruce Boudreau wants the Sabres job. And I'm sure Don Granato really wants to continue what he started here. This opportunity was looked at for him as a blessing in disguise. I think those three directions, the Sabres can't go wrong with one of those guys, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to be I would be like that malcontent. I'm not going to be like, man. I'll be. I just kind of want it to. I don't want it to happen quickly, but when it happens, I would want it to be one of those three. It was Gallant, by the way. I didn't even look that up.
Gallant,
just into my head, I'm literally looking at my face, and you're like, on my forehead, it says Gallant, you idiot. Gerard Gallant, yeah.
Gerard Gallant, yep.
Yeah. Yep. Throw him into the mix. He, from my understanding, he would be a dark horse, but he pretty much has the Seattle job locked up. And he's going to be known as like the expansion coach, basically. I'm at this point because I still don't understand why the Knights let him go. I like Gallant. Okay, so take those. Honestly, if Gallant came over to Buffalo, and he asked Terry and Kim and Kevin Adams, "Hey, I'm interested," and then you might have to overpay him. And I don't. When I say overpay, I don't know what overpay is to those. To Terry and Kim, I don't know. Maybe you have to overpay him.
Ralph Kruger.
You sign him to like a 2-year deal and be like, hey, you need to right this ship around and we'll give you an extension. And you overpay for him. I would rather have Gallant because look what he did with Vegas. And Vegas now is loaded, but they didn't start trading for talent, like real good talent, until after they had the misfits. And Gallant took the misfits and he did the same thing in Florida. He took misfit toys and made them into what their potential was. And any insider never understood why he got let go in Florida. And it managed and it wasn't even something where it was like inside management issue. You know what I mean? Like how like management has an issue with the coach. It wasn't even that. Like he just gets like let go because he gets a team to such a high ceiling where the owner or the GM are just like, man, he can't get us over the hump. Well, maybe we need to shake things up a little bit. His message is stale, and then just fire him.
Whereas in Buffalo, we've been in the basement for 10 years. We're just trying to contend for a playoff spot. I would like a competitive team. If he would be like that Vegas team that year. That Vegas team that year was so much as angry as it made some people to see an expansion team go to the Stanley Cup Finals. I was enjoying it. I liked it. Yeah,
there's a old school. There's a group of people that didn't like it. That's why the expansion draft changed.
Yeah. I saw him on Twitter. That's for sure.
And if you're the band of, I mean, Wild Bill Carrier is still doing his thing. Like, I mean, I get it. I would totally be. So those three coaches I wouldn't care if any of those three coaches, but if Gallant comes knocking at your door, come on in, big guy, because I don't know. I don't know what else you couldn't really go wrong. I know he hasn't won a Stanley Cup or whatever, but he has a pretty good pedigree, and he gets the most out of your players, which you've not had. Don't bring up Ted Nolan, because Ted Nolan that's a different. He doesn't have. Gallant at least has something.
Third time's the charm for Teddy Nolan. You think? Maybe. Oh my lord!
I think when you're talking about Patty LaFontaine, Ted Nolan and him kind of like. I mean, I know him and Tim Murray were kind of okay with each other, but like Tim Murray kind of like gave him the old like, "Hey man, you're gonna stay here to make the team suck." FYI.
That's the only reason you're here. You're here to just do what we tell you to do.
Yeah,
poor reason you're here. It's terrible.
Poor Teddy.
Terrible.
I hope they do have a night for him at some point, like just to. I don't know. He doesn't need his number retired or anything retired. He just needs to be back.
Right.
He's a good guy. From what I'm told, his interviews are great.
I'm sure, and I want to touch on this. This is the good stuff, okay? So we talked about a lot of the current stuff that's going on with the current Buffalo Sabres. The negative, okay? I'm not even going to talk about the good of the Buffalo Sabres yet. I'm going to talk about something that I didn't expect to talk about, actually, but I'm going to bring it up on the show. And let me just make sure I got, all my stats in front of me in regards to this player. So I went out on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube as soon as I had heard the news that Ryan Miller had decided to call it a career. Former Sabres goalie, 18 years in the National Hockey League, 11 of which were with the Buffalo Sabres. And I think Ryan Miller epitomizes for me, and I think he epitomizes for you, Phil, childhood, good times, happy times, better days, if you will. Goo Goo Dolls pun that you referenced earlier in the show. When we were off the air, actually. Better days back then when Ryan Miller was in the net for the Buffalo Sabres and won that Vezina trophy, wore the USA sweater with a ton of pride, brought us to that silver medal. Here's my take on Ryan Miller. One, I wish that the Sabres never traded him. I wish that he had played his whole career here. That would have been amazing. Two, I think Ryan Miller will never be as appreciated as he should be due to the fact that we had Dominik Hasek as a goalie on this team. But Ryan Miller won more games as a Sabre than Hasek did, and Ryan Miller's simply won more games in his career than Hasek did. Three, put that man's number 30 in the rafters. Put it up there with the French Connection, with Père LaFontaine, and right next to his predecessor, I guess you could say, outside of Biran, Dominik Hasek. What do you say in terms of summing up Ryan Miller's career with Buffalo and Ryan Miller's career in general? And do you think that they should retire his number?
I mean, it's hard to summarize Ryan Miller. Mm-hmm. Ryan Miller, any of the interactions I had with him, because he was an Amherst, and there was the lockout season. So, I mean, I was young at the time. That was before all those guys moved up. I was probably in my teenage years, and the one or two times that I ran into Ryan Miller, he was just like how you are described as a goalie, because we know Marty Biron is very open, very, boisterous talking. Dominik Hasek was his own guy. He was kind of a loon. Yeah, I mean, not in a good, in a good way in some ways. Yeah. Ryan Miller was his own kind of, I guess to put it in a decent term, he was his own zen. He kind of had it all in. And the couple of times that I saw him, I didn't go to a lot of Amherst games when I was little, but I think the one or two times that I did when he was there, I think he shut out I don't know who he shut out. Like, honestly, like, it was so long ago where that lockout season, the Amerks should have gotten way further than what they did, especially when you look at the talent. And it wasn't coaching, because I think Randy Cunningworth was the coach then. That was during his first stint. Ryan Miller was, you could tell then, and I think the American Hockey League kind of triggered him to realizing, like, because in college, obviously, he was dominant in Michigan
Right.
State.
Right.
He was dominant. I get that. He came in the American Hockey League, and I think he was kind of like, where am I going here? Because they have Marty Baron, how you mentioned, they had Marty, and Mika Nornen was there. A lot of people tend to forget Mika Nornen. Mika Nornen was a fantastic goalie, and Marty has brought it up multiple times. Mika would have started on probably, I mean, if Toronto had Mika Nornen at the time, they probably would have been they would have been in a better place. I think they had out or something. Anyways, and that's like the one and only jab I can have at Toronto at this point in time. But I think there was such a log jam at goaltending, which obviously right now we're kind of all like, we don't know, and I know we have some things to talk about in that department. But Ryan Miller going up to the Sabres, I don't want to say he took the job from Ryan, but he kind of did, or he took it from Baron.
Oh, he did. Yeah, I could. Yeah,
Baron,
I love Marty, but
Marty had nothing. He couldn't do anything about it. Marty knew. Marty wasn't, and Marty has said it. He goes, and he knows Ryan really well, and he was. This, like how RJ was getting a tribute towards the last little bit here, just the saga of Miller from carrying that team through the playoffs when they didn't have any defensemen. They should have won a cup, and he knows that too. That's just, I mean, just how the cookie crumbles, Bruce Almighty, or whatever. Right. Him taking the Sabres to where they were that last year of the Goatheads, then bringing them into the Sluggo. It's the best way to describe it because it's visuals for me. He brought that team. They beat the big bad Boston Bruins a bunch of times. They were getting places. And then it was getting towards the end in Buffalo. And me and you both agree. We all wish he could have stayed. And that year, it almost felt like your best friend was moving away, like to college, or was moving away for a job.
You knew he was moving away, and he knew he was moving away, but you didn't want to talk about it yet.
Yeah, and it's like, and it was almost the same discussion that we were having this year. They were like, "Oh well, the Sabres might be," because remember it was like Steve Ott. They were trying to get grittier, and like, they might be a playoff team, and they ended up like it didn't fall flat on their face, but it just didn't turn out well. And then it got to where he went over to St. Louis. That kind of ended weird because they got ousted in the first round. A lot of people don't remember that. That's why he didn't stay. Then he went to Vancouver, and that was because he had to go out west because his wife.
Right. His wife's an actress, right?
Yep. And I mean, they have a beautiful family now, and he's very happy. I mean, I wish he would have went to Anaheim earlier. And at the time, Anaheim had goaltending. So I mean, they had Gibson and they had Anderson. So he didn't really have a shot until recently, and now they're bad. It's like you wanted a swan song for him, even if he was going to be a backup or a 1B. You wanted that for him, but it's just there's a part of me that feels bad that he didn't get that. The only real chance he had. I get that he had a chance in Vancouver, but the only real chance he had was in Buffalo, where he really could have won it. I mean, Vancouver, whatever you want to say, however good of a team, they always said they were a goaltender away. They were never a goaltender away. They just didn't have it. So I think, to get back to, like, should his number be retired? Absolutely. There's so many stupid things in those rafters right now. People make jokes about it all the time, how bring the banner up. We ended the 18-game losing streak. Bring the banner up. We won 2 out of 3. If you're gonna do those, Ryan Miller's jersey should be there, and they're probably gonna put it up as a Sluggo logo. They're not gonna. They won't. It should be a go ahead because he was dominant in. That was the year, and I mean, I know they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and finally that year after, and he had the Vezina Trophy, and he had the President's Trophy, blah 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 blah. But the goat head year, that's where you said Google Dolls, you said Better Days. He epitomized. He took whatever Hasek had, and he had his own zen about him. He did his own thing.
I think that's a really good point.
100% number 30 in the rafters. You have a night for him. It doesn't have to be next year. It can be the year after. It could be when pretty much this whole COVID thing is kind of blown. You know you're going to have a sellout crowd there. And not just to sell tickets. Just do it because you should. Don't do it to sell tickets. That's right. That's where I'll keep it at.
Do it because it's the right thing to do, number one. And number two, that was a dominant time in the franchise's history in large part because of him. Like, they would not have had the teams that they had those 2 years if he wasn't in the net. I love Marty Biron. I love him. But Ryan Miller, as you said, Marty Biron knew how special Ryan Miller was, dating back to when Ryan was in Rochester, coming up into the Sabres organization as his backup. It was only a matter of time before Ryan Miller kind of took the reins of that net at that time. And for me, he gave them a chance to win every single game. There was never a shadow of a doubt that they had a chance to win every single game with him in their net. Regardless of who they had on defense, they always had a chance to win. And I think that those days are long gone. Right now, we're wondering, who our captain is going to be, who our coach is going to be. I mean, the team is a mess. But it's a good thing, though. When I heard that news, I thought to myself, man, for every bad decade there was, Ryan Miller was a part of a really great decade in Sabres history. He was here for 11 years, basically the better part of 8 years as a Sabre. He spent a couple years in Rochester, but I think that his number should be retired. And you talk about what Dominic Hasek brought to the team. He brought it his own way. I think Dominic knew how dynamic he was physically in the net, whereas Ryan Miller knew how dynamic he was as a competitor, and he kind of dialed that up rather than the physical stuff. Whereas Hasek, it was kind of the opposite. But yeah, I mean, what a phenomenal career that he had. I think Hall of Fame consideration could be in play. I mean, he's the winningest U.S.-born goaltender of all time, and he did it for multiple franchises at a high level. So it's very tough to not throw that thought process out there that he might be in the Hall of Fame one day, but he definitely belongs in the rafters, I think, with Pat LaFontaine and Hasek and the French Connection as far as his number being retired. So that's more of an upbeat note, I think, for Sabres fans to kind of look forward to that next season. I think that should happen. The franchise, marketing-wise, has gotten so many things wrong as well. The 50th anniversary jersey shortage, spelling the last name of players' jerseys wrong. This is the one thing they gotta do. They gotta get this right. They gotta retire his number. I don't want to see another player wear it. I don't feel like it's right. I just don't. So 30 is Ryan Miller's forever in my book. So moving on from that awesome discussion, big trip back into memory lane. We talk about the future of the Buffalo Sabres, and we know about Eichel and Reinhart, and we've thrown our takes out there on that. But what is the good that is on the team that will be on the team next season? This season was a bad one, but it wasn't all bad, Phil. There was reason to kind of hang our hats on some things that were pretty good. And the good is Casey Middlestat, who we touched on, Dylan Cousins, Paige Thompson, who we acquired in the Ryan O'Reilly trade, and UPL, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, the goalie that took the league by storm, obviously with a little bit of a shortened debut. He got hurt prior to really getting his feet wet in the league. But what were your thoughts? We'll start off with UPL. What were your thoughts on the short sample size that we saw from a goalie that has been lauded as the future of this team?
So UPL is kind of tough for me because I know you really liked him. I watched a lot of him in Rochester, and this is where, to me, defense and goaltending is so odd in the AHL. I know I said Ryan Miller basically just took the bull by the horns and ran with it all the way through the NHL. UPL was not good in the AHL, not at all. I think I was at his first game, and it was kind of like that first goal that got scored on him in the NHL, where we're just kind of you shouldn't let that happen.
You let that one in? What the heck's going on?
Yeah, you're supposed to be a professional hockey player. You played in Europe with professional. Are you sure? What happened? Yeah, but he kind of got shell-shocked that first game, I believe, with the Amherst. And I mean, the Amherst were good. The problem with Otto was he kind of laden them with veterans. So your CJ Smiths of the world were scoring goals, and just the young guys weren't really producing because they weren't playing the minutes and yada yada yada. Obviously, the structure of the organization, that's a different podcast for a different day.
Right.
UPL, to me, I was a little worried for. I was very scared for. But in the short sample size that I did see him, he was a pleasant surprise. He was stopping lots of shots. The high majority of them, yes, there were a lot of really high danger chances, as they would say, for analytics and stuff like that, where that slot area, close in. But most of his shots, I believe, were kind of from the outside. The defense was playing pretty well in front of him. Not great. I'm not going to say that. They were playing NHL caliber. They weren't playing that AHL caliber, which is what he was seeing when he was with the Amherst. That's where the defense issues kind of come in. The defense has to play well in front of a goalie in order for sometimes a goalie to look really good. If you play NHL caliber defense, whether as long as it's decent, as long as it's average to slightly above average, you're going to make a goal. That's why I think Tuukka Rask looks as good as he is, because he literally sits on his knees the whole time and shots come at him on the bottom. That's and I'm not comparing UPL to Tuukka Rask. They are from the same country.
Right. However,
what I'm saying is, if you have a decent defense, just has to be NHL caliber, you're going to get out. You're going to look a lot not better than what you should, but you're not going to get shell shocked in there every single night. And the Sabres, I think Granato kind of knew. Granato was kind of like, guys, you have to make sure the shots are staying to the outside. Got to cut down on those high danger chances. Get the passes out. Play with pace. And I mean, to get into coaching terms, that's what I mean. Play with pace. Keep the shots to the outside. Let him handle it. He's athletic. UPL, if you notice, he's very athletic. He can move, sometimes over move, and he's very aggressive. They played to his strengths, and I think UPL has a good future here. Maybe we have difference in opinions on what's going to happen next year. However, we don't know what's going to happen with Linus Ullmark now. So the goaltending situation really gets weird next year, because they have Tatarski. He's signed for another year. He's supposed to be in the AHL next year. He was supposed to be in the AHL with UPL. And UPL was supposed to, the plan was UPL, Tatarski, AHL. Linus Ullmark, 1A, your 1B. Not Carter Hutton. I think Carter Hutton was gone. I think that writing was kind of on the wall, and they just didn't have a way to get rid of him this year. Because he's a good veteran for the team. You just don't release him just to save yourself $1 million on the cap. I think that's what a lot of fans don't understand. I know he was not great. I get that. I understand.
Yeah, you can't
just
cut a guy.
Cut players.
Right.
Yeah, you just can't cut. It's not like in the NFL where you can just I'm so sorry.
Right.
We just saved $8 million on the cap. No one can do that. It's not that way because people talk. It's kind of what we were talking about earlier. People talk in the NHL circles. If they would have done that to Hutton, I mean, what goaltender is going to want to come here? Because Hutton probably would have, been like, "Hey, this is what they did to me."
Chirping and right.
So, but yeah, UPL. I think he's going to be forced into a situation next year where I don't want to say
probably
he's not going to be
start. No,
he's not going to be the starter. No, I think they're going to.
If Ullmark doesn't come back, he's the starter, right?
I wouldn't say that. Columbus has two goaltenders, and I'm not saying Columbus is good, but Columbus has two, Merzlinkins and Korpisalo. They're not staying there.
Mm.
They're going to set the market. So the Sabres are in need of a goaltender. They're going to, as bad as I think this is going to be, the Sabres are going to this is probably one of going to be those off-season decisions that all of us are going to be like, you kind of overpaid there. I don't know who they're going to get, but they're probably going to overpay for somebody to be a 1A, and it might force UPL to be a 1B. So,
and that's if they don't keep Ullmark, which frankly I hope they do. I thought Ullmark was great,
but he in his press conference he left the door open for get rid of me or leave me unprotected. I don't know. And Ullmark is Ullmark, by the way, like I know he's not on your list. Ullmark is a great 1A, 1B, but he can't last a whole season. That's what he's going to have written on him.
He's proven that, which I think is actually, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but in terms of negotiating, Ullmark has proven that he is not a full season, 35-start guy or 40-start guy. So I think for the Sabres, if you're negotiating with Ullmark, you're not signing him to a long-term deal anyway. You're signing him to a 2-year deal at most. Yeah. And that's actually what they're in the market in, because UPL isn't ready to start yet. He's certainly ready to maybe back things up, I think, if Ullmark is here.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Mm-hmm.
That's what would make UPL better. But if they don't keep Ullmark, I think if you lose Eichel, if you lose Reinhart, you lose Ullmark, you lose Ristelainen, the attractions on this team will be few and far between. UPL might be one of the only attractions as far as a top prospect that this team's got. So that might force their hand, is what you said, a little bit too early, and we'll see. But I liked him just in terms of what I saw. I think there's a lot of room to grow. I think the potential is there. As you touched on it, physically, he can move in the net. And I think any goalie, whether it's Ryan Miller or Hasek or even Marty Biron, all those three goalies could move. They were dynamic in terms of their flexibility. I think UPL has a little bit of that, and I think that's exciting. Buffalo has been able to be blessed with some really good goalies, those three in particular, and Grant Fuhr, Barrasso, all those guys. I think that's something that maybe UPL could be a part of. That would be pretty fun for Sabres fans.
And they have a couple other. They have another. I think it's an American. I almost said DiPietro. That's not it. DiPietro. They have a DiPietro, and he's in Rochester. That's not a goalie.
And we got to touch on Michael Hauser too, and what he was able to do. I mean,
great story.
I don't know how legitimate great story, right? It was phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, right? And I mean where is he in the future plans? So think of it this way. So worst case scenario, Ullmark doesn't come back. UPL has to then move up. You have then a Tokarski because he's already signed, and you just sign Hauser back, and that's your 1-2 in Rochester. And there is another guy in the pipeline. His name's escaping me. There's a lot of names. We do have another pretty decent goaltender. He is in college. His name is escaping me.
Oh yeah,
like he's there, and
I know who you're talking about. He just took that epic graduation photo. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, because there's just so many prospects and stuff that my head. But he had he backed up this year, but he was really good. Like any of the games he was in, and he wasn't playing slob teams. He just came into because of COVID. Sometimes teams had weird back-to-back scenarios or close game scenarios that he had to play. So. I'm not saying the future in goaltending is fantastic, but for next year, I would not be surprised if Linus leaves, if they end up not re-signing him or they trade him for, whatever. I think you can sign in this, especially this year, because the Sabres will have the cap space. They'll be able to bring in a veteran goaltender, at least for a year or two. That's not your Carter Hutton. It would be a little bit better than that. It would probably be a little bit more. It'll cost you a little bit more. But I think this year overall. I don't think it's going to be a bad thing to, grab a veteran goalie. And if UPL, I don't want, again, I told you, I wish he would be in the AHL for another year to kind of like had that experience with like not so great defense to kind of, get.
They might force that though. They could bring somebody else. Maybe Hauser, being that he's a little bit more of an older guy, maybe he is a backup, and UPL, takes the reins in the minor leagues to start the season. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how that situation pans out. And I look at a guy like Paige Thompson too, who we have on here, and he's looked at as really the only trade piece that we were able to acquire back in that Ryan O'Reilly trade that we could really look at and say, wow, we got something for Ryan O'Reilly. It's just one player. Unfortunately, we were supposed to get 3 or 4. We got one, and that one is Tage Thompson. I'm here to tell you, guys, I really like Tage Thompson. I feel like he's a big, physical, young, dynamic forward. I know there are moments in games where he looks like he's kind of behind on things, and then there's moments in games where he just lights the world on fire. I don't think he's a full, accomplished version of himself yet, and that's exciting to me, actually. I look at things kind of opposite to what most do in terms of Tage Thompson. People are like, well, he's not ready yet. He's not good enough. Well, he's not good enough yet. We have to see it through. He's, 22, if that? So we have to see that through. What do you think of Tage Thompson in terms of his growth from last year to this year?
So this is one of the things that I feel better about. So if you want to kind of compare, I guess, size and like what they can kind of like size and skill, think of Justin Bailey and think of Nick Baptiste. They were bigger guys. They had speed, they had skill, blah, 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 blah. We all thought they were going to be second line wingers in the NHL. Turns out they're not. They're minor leaguers, fringe players, basically, that you call up, throw on your second line for a couple games. They might pot you a goal or two, whatever. Tage Thompson, I think, is a better version of those two because he has more of a skill set. He continues to grow into his body, and
right.
he is still developing. It's like you said, he's a younger guy, and some people are going to be like, why are you comparing him to Nick Baptiste and Justin Bailey? I'm just saying, like, their size from beginning to when they ended up getting. I think Tage Thompson has a better skill set and can definitely be your middle six winger of the future. He can definitely move around. He can definitely, stick handle in a phone booth, as they like to say. He's good with that. Sometimes, though, it's the running joke on Twitter is he looks like a giraffe out there, and he kind of like he has speed, but sometimes it's like he's got that weird like tall guy like I'm stuck in between something, and you're like, Tage, what are you doing? Like all you gotta do is like.
I can't say he's the most. I can't say he's the most athletic guy based on his size. He's kind of gangly, but he'll grow into that. Like you said, he hasn't even grown into his body yet, and that is exciting. This guy could be as much as 230, 240 pounds at some point, and that's. I think that's exciting to me. I mean, not many teams have size like that.
And have skill like he has. He'll make boneheaded, and we saw with Granato, and it's kind of like we're going to get into with the other guys. Granato brought out probably the best in Tage, other than what Tage did in Rochester. When he was in Rochester, he was like lights out in Rochester. That's another reason why I kind of compared him to Bailey and Baptiste, because those two were lights out in Rochester. Lights out. Everybody loved them. As soon as they got to the NHL, though, it was a different story. Tage Thompson has a different level to him. I don't want to say he has elite level, but there's certain parts of his game that are elite.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm excited for him. I think that's one of the few players on this team, along with Dylan Cousins, that I'm extremely excited about. I think when you look at the Sabres' inability to draft effectively over the last decade, judging from what I've seen, whether it was with Kruger or with Granato, I thought Cousins showed some decent things. He was obviously better with Granato than he was with Kruger, as was pretty much everybody. But I really like what Cousins brings to the table in terms of his speed, his awareness. I mean, he made a lot of back-ended plays coming out of nowhere from the back end to the front end that veteran guys make those plays, make those passes, make those shots, attempt those shots. So I'm thinking that Dylan Cousins is actually one of the, if I'm putting together a power rankings here, this would probably be it. Middlestat, Cousins, Tage, and UPL in terms of like young up-and-coming players on this team that I'm excited about. What is your thought process on Dylan Cousins thus far?
Well, couple things. Dylan Cousins, as a lot of Sabres fans do, we have high expectations for him. He's a first-round draft pick, top, I think he was a top 5. Sorry if I'm there's a lot of top 5 draft picks in this organization right now. And I'm probably right. He probably is a top 5 draft pick. Might even be a top 3. I don't know. Dylan Cousins, though, to me, I think, I don't want to say he exceeded expectations, but he brought things to the table I did not know he had. He has got a feistiness to him. That is the number one thing. He showed leadership qualities, and kind of rolling back to what we said earlier with like Eichel might be out the door, Reinhart might be out the door. That's a C and an A out the door. Say what you say about Okposo, he may be back, but he's only an A.
Mm-hmm.
Cousins next year might be wearing, I'm not going to say a C, but he is earning himself to that A.
Mm-hmm.
He's a young guy. I understand that. And if a Tortorella comes in the door, he's probably not getting an A. However, Tortorella, let's just say Tortorella is going to love Dylan Cousins because Dylan Cousins could be somewhat of a Nick Foligno modern day. He's got speed. He's got grit. He plays smart. And the more he plays, I don't know if he's going to be a first-line center. I think he could be definitely pegged to be a second-line center in the league. However, I mean, like we said, when it was Kruger in here, he kind of put him as winger, and he was fine. It wasn't. I had no problem with because it was a weird stat. Like it was almost like a goal more a game they were scoring when Cousins was on the ice, and not because he was scoring the goals. It was just because he was there. Because
he was there. Yeah, he was a part of just solid hockey. Anytime he played solid hockey, he was a part of it. That's pretty awesome.
He's a smart young player, and I mean, he got into 2 fights, and the second fight didn't go as well as the first fight. I know he got a little bit beat up in the second fight, but the man will come to play. The first time that Dahlin got hit, when we all start complaining about Dahlin getting hit, he's the one on either that shift or the very next shift. He's not afraid to go, and he can sock. He can unload uppercut. And you're an MMA guy.
Mm-hmm.
That guy can throw a mean hook. He can throw a nice.
You know who he reminds me of? And for the MMA fans out there, he reminds me of like a Rory McDonald who fought Robbie Lawler, and extremely like if you looked at Rory McDonald, you'd think that guy is probably like a science teacher, or maybe like he works in like software engineering. Doesn't really look like much.
He doesn't look like the part.
Yeah, doesn't look the part whatsoever. And Dylan Cousins doesn't really look the part until he's out there, and you're like, wow, this guy's actually got a lot more than what you thought. And that's what you said to start off. He has a game to him that I didn't even know he had. And I don't even think Dylan Cousins knew he had it until this season kind of played out the way that it did. And Phil, I got to tell you, like, it was music to my ears in terms of all the bad we were hearing from Eichel, all the bad we were hearing from Reinhart, Risto. Dare I say it, I think this team is changing. And you know, these guys might be the way of the past, whereas Cousins and Middlestat and Tage, those are like the building blocks for the future. And Sabres fans can roll their eyes at that, but I would be pretty optimistic about that if I was a Sabres fan, which I am. I am optimistic about that. And I think Cousins saying that he wants to be a part of this team for a long time and be a leader on this team for a long time, how could any Sabres fan dislike that with what we have seen from Cousins so far? I think he is probably the reflection of what a Sabre should be at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Cousins, and I kind of turned to like loving the guy by the end of the year. He showed me a different side that I didn't know he had. And it was funny because a lot of the hockey like analysts on NBC, when he was on national TV, they weren't as surprised. And I know we all give Pierre Maguire because he can kind of get a little, he can just kind of go off and name like the guy from St. Pete up in
Yeah.
Madagascar, blah blah
He's a little
blah.
zany. Yeah, he's a little zany.
But what he's said about Dylan Cousins, he goes, I don't think Buffalo understood what they got in him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the game that I don't know if that was the game that he fought, but there was he had a hit and you didn't expect it. And I'm pretty sure he put a guy over the boards into the Buffalo bench. And I mean, it's not like how it used to be where everybody, I mean, probably words were said, but like back in the day, obviously, if you put a guy into your own bench, usually somebody's gonna sock him a few times when he's over the side. Obviously, they just pushed him back up, and I just remember Pierre saying something. He's like, "Yeah, I don't think Buffalo knows what they have in Cousins, like the upside." And I guess the best way to kind of compare him, and I don't want to say he's Captain Crunch. I'm not going to say that, but when you want to talk, like he's got qualities of a Michael Pekka, where he can score. He's got leadership. He's gritty. He can skate. He's smart. Like, let's just hope that Dylan Cousins, I mean, like I said, nobody likes seeing anybody get hurt. I know Dylan Cousins got hurt a couple times. I just hope he doesn't fall into, like, the concussion thing, like how Pekka did.
And Tim Connolly, too.
Yeah. Right, and I really think Cousins has a very bright future. I just don't want Sabres fans to think he's the heir apparent to Eichel in case if the Eichel thing goes down. He might end up having to be forced into first line center minutes. And that's that's okay. He's going to get experience out of that, but at the same time, like I like him. I like his game. I think he's got a very, very bright future, especially with the Sabres right now.
I'm glad you brought up Eichel in that, and not falling into the trap of people thinking that Cousins is like Eichel, because I think there are facets of Cousins' game that Eichel will never have, and there's facets of Eichel's game that Cousins might never have. So they're different players, very different. And I think that one of those players, I think, is meant to be here for a long time. The other one, unfortunately, I think that this team's changing. I think the guys that have been here are going, and the guys that haven't been here long are going to be used as the building blocks of this team. And yeah, the Sabres might not win a lot of games for the next couple years. Like we know that. You and I know that. But we haven't won many games the last 6 years. So something's got to give. Something has to give. Someone has to be held responsible outside of the coach. We fired what? How many head coaches have we had since Lindy? Six head coaches. So
right around there.
Five or six. Yeah. So I mean, somebody has to be held responsible at some point. And as much as I like Jack Eichel, I talked about it, and we've talked about it too privately off the air. But I just feel like it just wasn't meant to be. It just wasn't meant to work out. I hope I'm wrong in that. If he stays here and it works out and they win the Stanley Cup in a couple years, and I'm wrong, I'd be more than happy to be wrong. But it just doesn't look like it looks like it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And another one of those players I'm excited about, shifting gears from that sidebar, Casey Middlestat. We talked about him as being probably the second best forward on this team besides Reinhart, without Eichel in the lineup, of course. What do you think of Casey Middlestat and what he brought to the team, coming off of a little bit of a time of trepidation where yourself and myself, prior to the season starting, were wondering if Casey was going to make it to the trade deadline on this team?
Yeah, right. Because he was asset at the time. I admit I don't want to say I was wrong. What you're getting out of him now is completely different from what we saw previously. And then he's had stretches and stuff, but this was like a stretch where it was like, this looks like there can be consistency, especially with the line mates that he had in Paige and Asplund. And Asplund, I know, is not on your list, but Asplund surprised a lot of people. His shot rate,
I really like him.
Asplund, I watched him in Rochester. Asplund, he'll be a really good, like, third, fourth line. He can play winger and center, too. That's why him and Middlestat worked out great, because they could take faceoffs, like, just boom, boom, boom.
Right.
That's why I'm a little worried if the center thing gets shaken up. Like, you're going to move Asplund down, you're going to put Middlestat up, and I'm like, they work really good together. They worked really good together in Rochester. But Asplund can kill penalties and what have you. But getting back to Mitts, as they like to call him, he's another one that can, stick handle in a phone booth. He's gotten better in the corners. that's something I noticed. He used to not be really good in the corners, and that means he got stronger, which is what I've been. Honestly, I
Praying.
don't really care too much about his upper body strength in hockey. It's about your lower body strength. So obviously he did some squats over the summer, probably a little bit more than that. I know I made fun of him about pull-ups and stuff like that, but I feel like he's kind of becoming a guy, a man, in a way, in the world of hockey. And I know Don Granato, he'll probably say something in his, well, I know Kevin Adams is tomorrow, and he said it, but Casey Middlestat said in his presser, he said Don Granato, when he became the coach and he knew the writing was on the wall, that Taylor Hall is going to be gone, we're not going to have as much. And obviously Eichel's not coming back. Casey probably knew Eichel wasn't coming back from, when he got hurt. Granato looked at him, had a players only meeting with him, and said, the keys are yours. You either take it or you leave it. Mm-hmm. I am challenging you to be the best hockey player you can be right now with the circumstances that we have. And he basically said, take that all out of, take that away. I don't care what you do. Just go out and do it. That is what Granato, and going back to Granato, coach, whatever.
Right.
He lit something under Casey that the last couple of coaches really couldn't do.
Right.
So
that's big. I think that in and of itself could be like Don Granato's kind of negotiation ploy or interview chip that he could say, hey, I helped Casey Middlestat's game out. I mean, he was looked at as a potential bust. Like that was fair.
Oh, it was written on the wall.
It was written on the wall, like maybe he's not it. His number changed from 37 to 73 down in Rochester, and he looked weird, and it just didn't look right. I'm thinking to myself,
he wasn't playing well down in Rochester either. I watched him a couple times, and he looked lost a lot of the time. And it's like, dude, it's not it's you can do more down here. You should have more space, and he was just all over the place.
Right, and that's a guy that collegiately he was great. I mean, he had a great college career, juniors, whatever you want to call it. He had a great career there. So, I'm very curious to see how he kind of parlays this season into next. No matter who the head coach is, I think he's got a newfound confidence in himself, and I'm very excited for that. But yeah, man, I think, I knew that this show would be an in-depth show. We approached, the 2-hour mark as far as recapping the Sabres, 2020, 2021 season recap. Phil, as far as any guesses as to what we expect to hear from Sabres general manager Kevin Adams tomorrow, what do you think we're going to hear?
So I almost didn't want, I kind of thought about how you were going to phrase this question. And I think tonight, right now, Kevin Adams is at his house thinking about some of the reporters that we have either mentioned or not mentioned, and what they're gonna regurgitate to him tomorrow, because as well as I do, there's gonna be 2 questions out of the 80 questions he gets asked tomorrow, 2 to 5 questions good. How we kind of wrapped up with the good. He's gonna get questions nonstop about Eichel, and then it's gonna be just like today, a little bit around Rhino. A little bit about Risto. I mean, and Risto is going to be an afterthought. Can you believe that after the last 3 years of trade Risto, bang, everybody's bang?
Yeah.
Kevin Adams is in for it. When you took the job, Kevin, he's obviously, I know he's not listening, but it's like I'm speaking to him. You're the voice of the Sabres, because Terry and Kim cannot speak. So. And he doesn't have a hockey guy with him to kind of help him out. So anytime I've heard Adam speak, by the way, he's actually done a pretty good job.
I think I think he's done great as far as the situation that he's been thrown in.
Qualifications be damned with him. He's gonna get shelled tomorrow, not only by the local media, but by because now everything's out, the national media. I mean, who knows? Elliot Friedman might be on that call. James Myrtle, you name the insiders, He's gonna get and I think it's gonna be a bigger call than what he's used to. And because he had he had that right before he fired Kruger. Remember, he had that weird conference call right in the middle of the season, right before Kruger got fired.
Yep.
And I was like,
I watched it. Yeah.
You're like, if you're not going to do it
live.
now, and it took to get down to Boca Raton to get on the freaking yacht that you spent all this money on during the COVID era. Like, don't even get me started. Anyways, that's going on a rant, different category. Tomorrow, he's going to get so many questions asked. One of those reporters, like we said, is going to, just like how I just kind of regurgitated to you, that X, Y, or Z reporter is going to be like, so are you going to have to go down to Boca Raton and talk to Carey and Kim about trading Jack Eichel? And are they going to have to give you the okay? I'm leaving the silence because that's what's going to get some form that's going to get asked.
Yeah.
And he's going to, and that's not the only odd question. He's going to have, if you thought these pressers were, he basically is like
he's like taking all of them. Yeah, he's like the Thanos getting the Infinity Stones and just awful, stupid questions. Yeah,
it's going to be complete tomorrow, and one of those reporters, and honestly, it might be some odd reporter that we don't like, some like NHL, like it's like a follow-up question, but it's like the booming question, and Kevin Adams, like, I don't know, have we seen Kevin Adams be pushed so far to the edge where he kind of is like Eichel, where he's just like, guys, listen, like, enough is enough, like, I've given you everything, but I guarantee that Terry and Kim are going to be brought up. Are you going to get the okay if you have to trade these people? And I think he's going to give you honest answers, but he's also going to give you those answers where we're not going to like tomorrow, where it's going to be like, well, I don't know yet. Oh, blah, blah, blah. We still have to get into the season. Guys, I need to even look at the draft board. I haven't even looked at the draft board yet. It's like you're guaranteed a top 3 pick. There's three guys in there. Any one of them can be 1, 2, 3. And literally, like, the top 3 guys this year, I'm just seeing the rankings. The top 3 guys have been rotated in and out of those 3 picks. So it's like whoever the Sabres are going to get, they're pretty much I'm not saying they're all the same guys. They're all actually different, like, positions, but they're all top in their position.
Right.
So, like, Kevin, don't give me that. Like, not saying we know who you're going to pick because we don't know what your position is, but you're going to get a good player this year. We need to know, are you going to rip this thing apart like you probably should? And that's 50-50. That to me is 50-50. Should you rip it apart? And there might be,
well, they're definitely, as we talked about, they're definitely ripping it apart to the tune of Eichel, Risto, and possibly Reinhart. I think those guys are gone. We have a high pain threshold, I guess you could say, as far as believing that those guys would be gone. But to me, like, and not to interrupt you, but I feel like Kevin Adams is going to be just doused with bad questions. And I get that these reporters have a job to do, but they know what they're doing. And Kevin Adams knows what they're doing. And if Kevin Adams knows what they're doing, and if they know what they're doing, the fans know what they're doing. And it's been going on a long time. They used to do it to the Bills, and the Bills were bad. It took the Bills to get a coach that wouldn't put up with it. And the Sabres don't have that. Sean McDermott won't put up with questions like that. And Sean McDermott has a Rolodex of answers that he's answered the same question 47 different ways, to where the reporter just won't even bother asking that question anymore. Where I feel like the Sabres are so inexperienced, they just can't find their footing yet with questions that they're uncomfortable with, because they don't know how to find that Rolodex of answers. I don't know if they're groomed. I don't know. But
well, I mean, Ralph Kruger he didn't have a Rolodex. He had like a thesaurus and then a dictionary and then
a Rolodex of lies.
Not even lies. He just knew how to get around the answer. He did lie. Don't get me wrong, but he knew, like,
right.
Some of his press conferences, man, were just like, he would talk in big words, and it was like, I would just be like, I'm kind of getting what you're saying, but you're dancing around whatever question that was just asked.
With words that,
like, and he did
don't care to know.
No, he did flat out lie about the Eichel thing, where he goes, oh, this happened, and like Eichel called him out, which is not good for Ralph at the time. That's when he should have been fired. Which, I mean, at the time this guy wasn't falling yet. But
Right.
he goes, yeah, Eichel was hurt this morning in practice, and Eichel goes, no, I got hurt in the game last night. Like,
right.
Right after.
Like, writing's on the wall for this idiot. That's for sure.
Yeah, man, he makes money in ways that we can't. What did we say? He's like a salesman. Like he's the guy in the meme that slaps the hood of the car and you're driving off in like that 1973 Toyota Prius that is like shaking as it drives out of the parking lot.
Yeah, he's like a used car salesman, but he's a used car salesman, but he can't sell anything to his players. Like he can
sell everything to everybody else, but
it's very weird.
Yeah, and I can't believe his system just sounded so. I thought Bilesmo was bad. Well, no, I thought Housley's system was bad. His system was actually, if you look at it, you compare it to the rest, his system was actually decent,
right?
Comparatively, but like Housley's system, like none of the defensemen knew what they were doing, and then you get to fast forward to Kruger, you get this weird system that got forwards and centers don't know where they are, and then your power play's good, but your penalty kill is awful because you kept Craig Smith, who has been the issue with the penalty kill, who's been running your penalty kill for the last 4 or 5 years. That's my tangent. Craig Smith should have, before Ralph Kruger, Craig Smith should have been kicked. He's a Hall of Famer. I get that. God bless the guy. He should have never been an assistant head coach on the Buffalo Sabres for as long. He should have been kicked out with the last coach.
We know one thing is for sure. We know that this offseason is going to be one of the most memorable in Sabres history, for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that this team is not going to be competitive anytime soon. But then again, they are the Buffalo Sabres. Just when you think they're bad, they're good like they were in 05-06. Who the hell knows, man?
Or they rattle off a 10-game winning streak and they're on a war path. Like, what is going on? The NHL is the weirdest, and I'll leave everybody with this. The NHL is the dumbest league out of the major 4 leagues, and I know the MLB lately is giving them a run for their money in a lot of ways.
Oh my God, a run for their money.
Because I know you know the MLB.
Lately.
The MLB, well, you're comparing like MLB, who's got like gazillions of dollars, and then you got the NHL, who's just maybe billions. And anyways, this season and I'm going to put a bow on the Sabres season. The Sabres season sucked. Everybody knows that. Honestly, I'm kind of over it at this point. That's why I couldn't talk about it, just because of how negative things are in Sabres land. And I mean, today was like kind of the day where I can kind of, hey Ryan, let's just sit down and talk. We can decompress. Right. But to put a bow on the regular season, the playoffs are different. I know they're different, animal, whatever. The regular season was a joke for everybody. These divisions are a joke. I hated them. That Canadian division, McDavid got 100 points, and McDavid's the best player in the NHL. Don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. 100 points in 56 games against teams that don't play defense.
Yeah.
Austin Matthews all of a sudden is an MVP candidate. Where was he last year? Where was he the year before? Not that he wasn't scoring goals or putting up stats, but he wasn't doing it at this pace. And now everyone's like, oh, because it's the Toronto media, it's the NHL. The problem is, and I'm glad they're moving to TNT, and I'm glad they're moving to ESPN. I'm glad those deals got signed. You have no idea how happy I am for the American market, because the NBC was like, that was like watching paint dry sometimes. And I know a lot of the same guys are coming. But anyway, so like I said, bow on it. The divisions, I hope those never come back. They were awful. If I have to watch 8 Islanders games, and God bless that Metropolitan Division the past X amount of years. Did you watch any of the Islanders games? Because if you did, I feel bad for you. It was really bad. That is awful. It was like the New Jersey Devils. of yesteryear without hitting.
I remember when they released the divisions, I thought, this season's going to suck.
The Rangers games were fun for the most part. I mean, not every game was fun, but like Rangers games for the most part were fun. Capitals games were like, one was really good, one was really bad, one was like the COVID happened. The Devils games were fun, but like I think weren't the Devils the one that started the COVID issue?
Right.
Like our division sucked overall. The Canadian division's a joke because nobody plays defense up there. And they don't have defense. Like, none of those teams have defense. Toronto kind of has a defense. And I'm not, again, people in Toronto are going to be like, oh, he doesn't know. You guys are playing in a run. It's just like the Canadian Football League up there. It's run and gun. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be very surprised if Toronto, if this is their year to get to the Stanley Cup final, God bless them. But they're going to play Montreal in the first round, I think. And they might get knocked out by Montreal just because they don't know how to play playoff hockey.
Right. Well, this season, to put a bow on it, this season was a bad one, and we covered it all, top to bottom. I think this was a good therapy session for myself, and this was a good therapy session for yourself as well. In terms of the
However, I'm going to watch all of the playoffs. I'm still going to watch the playoffs.
Yeah, I'll watch the playoffs. But Phil, thanks for joining me, man. It was a great time. I'll be sure to send you the link for the episode, folks. The link will be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube and Facebook. For Phil Munson, thank you for joining me, Phil. Lot discussed on the show. The Sabres, top to bottom, the good, the bad, the ugly. Thank you for joining me, buddy, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
No problem. Hey, we're going to have a lot to digest this offseason for, more than usual. We predict the crystal ball, those crystal balls.
A very active offseason. One dumpster fire in the Buffalo Sabres and what is expected to be another Super Bowl run for the Buffalo Bills. Gotta love being a Buffalo sports fan, right?
Hey, you can't have two good things, right? You have to have one's got to be.
It's got to be one or the other. You can't have both.
Well, it's got to be one or the other. Hey, but maybe I saw you post this earlier, and off how we were talking about the MLB earlier. Maybe the Oakland A's become the Buffalo A's.
I would love it. I would do
the MLB. Could you imagine that?
Dance. Give me the Buffalo A's or the Buffalo Rays. Give me something. Yeah, give me something. Buffalo Blue Jays they're fine too.
Go, and that's like right where it is downtown. Again, people were trying to make light of a terrible season of the Sabres. Just imagine the Sabres suck again. The Rays or the A's, downtown, springtime, Riverside, like I'm in Rochester, and I would be like, I'm taking a weekend trip to Buffalo to watch a back-to-back series on the weekend.
Dude, I would meet you out there anytime.
Oh, yeah, pop a few beers, have a couple hot dogs, whatever. I don't know I can't remember so food-wise there. Sorry, and I'll leave that with I know obviously wings and stuff like that's stupid. But ballpark, what is good at that ballpark? When the Bisons were actually around,
you can't go wrong with a hot dog and nachos, in my opinion. That's just that's just me.
That was good.
But and I would say they have really good beers there. But I think Buffalo for the downside of the Sabres, the city is doing really well despite the COVID stuff. And I know that there's a lot of Buffalonians that were watching this on the Facebook and on my YouTube channel. They're watching this now, probably thinking, we did talk about a lot of negative, but we talked about a lot of positive as well. And I think that, I experienced this with the Red Sox. They win their first World Series their first World Series in 86 years in 2004. And 3 years later, that team was largely torn apart and they won another World Series. So, this is the business of sports. It's never going away. And we're going to see some new blood in here, I think, and I'm excited for that. But Phil, really appreciate your time. And I'll definitely be touching base with you soon as we inch closer to the NHL draft and obviously free agency. We'll be doing a show together on that. Sounds good.
All right, sounds good, Ryan. Thanks so much. Hey, Sabres fans, stick in it. I don't know. That sounded totally wrong. That's how the Sabres season pretty much. Stick in it. That's their phrase for next year, and everyone's like, they got it from that guy on that. They got that guy from that podcast.
T-shirt.
sticking it.
That's awesome.
Phil Munson on the Sabres 2021 season. Oh man,
that is awesome. I gotta go.
I'll wear that T-shirt. I'll wear it very proud.
That's awesome. Take care, Phil. Thanks for joining me, everybody, and thanks for joining me, Phil. Take care, buddy.
Take care, everybody. Thanks again.
All righty, that is Phil Munson joining me on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, Buffalo Sabres 2020-2021 season recap. A ton was discussed on that show, top to bottom. What's going on with the Sabres positively? What's going on with the Sabres negatively? I think you got to look at things positively and negatively because there are good things going on with this team. There are also some not so good things going on with this team. I'm very excited, though, to cover the Buffalo Sabres throughout the rest of this offseason, despite the circumstances. It's going to be a very, very jam-packed, action-packed offseason. And, of course, on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, I look forward to covering the show, covering the team for you on the show, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts. My podcast is everywhere. The Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Feel free to subscribe, like, do what you got to do to stay up to date with all things TTSP, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Take care, everybody.